controversial subjects with the facts can be tense, but we are a science here to make things make sense.
So I don't think I have body dysmorphia after reading about it.
No, me either.
It's serious.
I think I wouldn't mind starting this podcast episode by saying like we're not therapists, we're not doctors. Like body dysmorphia is a really serious disorder, and neither of us have direct experience with it, as far as I can tell. I don't think I do. And so this is going to be a casual conversation. I think we will have conversations about body confidence and like our own body image issues.
Body image issues.
Yeah.
Different than body dysmorphia.
So this is just like a disclaimer that, you know, we're not here to tell you if you have it, but we'll go through some of the like science and medical literature to talk about what it's like when people have it. And then, I don't want to like conflate us thinking and having those moments of like body issues, which I still think is worth talking about. And I think a lot of people listening have that sort of casual understanding. Like I think a lot of our friends make jokes about having body dysmorphia.
Yeah. And now I'm like, and I never took them seriously. And now I want to be like, oh my God, are you serious?
Yeah.
Because it's serious.
So even just like one fact I'll throw it at the beginning in terms of how it manifests in people. So people who have body dysmorphia think about their body concerns more than 1 hour a day. But in most cases, as according to like the body dysmorphia, I can't think of the name right now, just like organization from the UK, they said it's usually 5 to 8 hours a day that you're thinking about it.
Yeah, I read.
You know what I mean? So it's like, that's like, obviously I don't think about those problems 5 to 8 hours a day.
Yeah. Like I read in the study that specific one that I thought was most interesting that they said 3 to 8 hours a day. Mm-hmm. You're obsessively thinking about this specific flaw in your body. And then they said other sort of ways that they'll diagnose this are repetitive behaviors such as excessive mirror checking, camouflaging, which is like constantly putting makeup over. A lot of the times it has to do with skin, I didn't realize, or obsessively buying clothes to cover up like some part of your body that you're obsessing over, skin picking, excessive weightlifting, and then thinking about your body in comparison to others for 3 to 8 hours a day. That's when I was immediately like, okay, like I don't have those, and it falls on obsessive compulsive disorders, like when they define them. Like I don't have those diagnoses. So then I was like, okay, like I don't know if I've ever said I have body dysmorphia, but now I know I wouldn't make that joke necessarily, but I definitely know that our friends talk about it and say they have it a lot, and now I want to actually ask them.
Yeah, well, I think, okay, so this is, I kind of mentioned this at the beginning of the other section of the pod, that like in some ways it's a good thing. Like this term has become so much more accessible, right? So I think there's not a lot of research or studies on it. A lot of it is linked to OCD research, as it's like seems to be linked as separate from say like depression and anxiety as a disorder. But for a long time, like people who have this disorder wouldn't have been able to classify themselves. They wouldn't have known. Doctors would have even just said like, oh, you just lack self-confidence, or you know, maybe you're depressed or those kind of things. So the fact that it's become such a common term, and not to conflate a different issue, but even it reminds me of something like ADHD. Like so many more people are aware that that's something they could have. And as a result, I think a lot of people actually say, oh, it's my ADHD, when they're not actually diagnosed with ADHD.
And so it's more of like a common, not to be confused with the bird I love, the common turn, but it's more of a common term.
Yeah, and that's a great thing that the general public, especially people who have this, or of course there's a scale of these things, right? Like there's people who have extreme body dysmorphia, and then there's probably people who fall on a different level of the scale. And so I think it is great to have a term, but as a result, people may more casually say like, oh, I negatively thought about my body once today, I have body dysmorphia, you know, or like, I wish I was more jacked, or I wish I could lose a little fat. Like those things are not body dysmorphia. And in fact, I can guarantee everyone's had those kind of thoughts.
Yeah.
In the same way where like with ADHD, sometimes you're like, oh, I just can't focus, or I'm understimulated or overstimulated. Like that doesn't mean you have ADHD. And so in both of these cases, I think you work with a medical professional, you get the proper test to find a proper diagnosis.
Yeah, for sure. It was definitely like, when I read about it, way more intense than the way that has been thrown around Especially amongst us gay men coming up on Pride.
Well, okay, here's the difference, and I think we should always delineate the line when we're talking about our own body confidence. I think that's like a term we can use.
Body confidence, although self-esteem, I have studies, are linked to body dysmorphia, but self-esteem maybe.
Yeah, but I mean, in especially the gay community, and I know this like is pervasive around all media and culture, like
it is
as well. But I think for sure in the gay community, there is this obsession with body, with being hyper masculine, with being ripped, and like you can see it like on Instagram, in the media, on Grindr, in places where like in clubs. Of course, there's body diversity across the queer community, but there is this weird pressure to be like extremely fit, or at least often. I won't say everyone, but often that extremely fit subgroup excludes other groups.
Yeah.
Right?
Ooh, whereas that's more of it.
You know what I mean?
That's the more like cathartic way to put it.
Well, I think that's true. I think like, of course, there might be people who don't want to be with jacked people, but I think in general, like for myself, and this isn't to like pump myself up, but like, of course I like find jacked guys attractive, but I find lots of guys attractive.
Said it before, jacked guy, red flag. You got a lot of talking to do to prove to me you ain't dumb in the head.
True. It's like a starting point.
But I do think that as gay, we always say as gay, that it's like, I think this is a huge issue for everyone, because even now more than ever when I'm on TikTok, they're showing me the straight guys bouncing and they're jacked. They're showing me the hot girls bouncing and they're unbelievably attractive to the point where both men and women, I'm like, what's real? What's fake? Like, I don't like, I obviously understand there's a big issue in the queer community worth talking about. But for my worldview, I'm like, I'm so aware of that sometimes I'm like, it's also a huge issue, I think, for straight people too.
Oh, totally.
Like,
yeah.
I think a lot of straight guys
have that pressure.
I don't know. This is so weird, but we walked by a date yesterday and like, I just looked at the straight couple and I was just like, good God, that must be hard. Like, I could tell it was a Tinder date, you know, you can just tell the vibes are off.
Dating is hard. Oh, okay. You felt like it's
But I just mean the girl was like so hot. Like the guy had like a different sort of vibe look to him that I just could only imagine there was so much physical assessment going on that I just think it's like, I'm so hyper aware of like the gay issues and the gay community. And I think we've been talking a lot about it because it's Pride, but I'm like, I think this is like just as bad for straight people too now more than ever. Like, I just feel like there's such a pressure for men to be jacked. There's such a pressure for women to look a certain way, as always. Like, sometimes you think these things are going to evolve, and I just feel like they're not evolving as quickly as I like had thought.
Yeah, because you hear, I mean, first I'll say, obviously we have such a male perspective because we're gay men and we're like, we find men attractive for the most part.
Also, I will say this is interesting. Of the 3 studies I read, 2 found that body dysmorphia is a higher proportion in men than women.
Oh,
which I thought was interesting. One was the other way around.
That I had heard it was actually mostly women, but pretty close to 50-50.
Yeah, no, I think I read that one too. But I found one, which was a survey of a specific university, where it was 14.7% of men and 12.3% of women. Oh, actually, sorry, opposite for that one. Had body dysmorphia based on these surveys. And so their point was that maybe it's heightened in university settings. They were trying to make a case for like stress and self-esteem being really challenging in those years.
Fair.
And they did a survey with specific questions to find out that body dysmorphia was higher. Whereas this other larger ones, in that one, actually women did have it higher. I made a mistake. And the other 2 I read, one was like a general consensus of America. It was very close, much lower around the normal amounts, which is 2.5% around there. And men were higher than women.
Oh yeah, well, I had read that 2% of the population is like estimated to have body dysmorphia.
So that's like sort of when they do overarching surveys of adults. But this specific survey on one university, so take with that what you will, found really high rates. And their point was that maybe right after puberty, in that young age, getting sort of thrust into this academic world, you maybe are just dealing with more self-esteem issues.
Yeah, and that's like the first, maybe not the first time, but you're certainly like becoming sexualized, and you're certainly becoming like
I was
an adult gone through puberty. Now you have access to like potentially having sex that like maybe you immediately become more self-conscious.
I was so, when I was in university, like all I was focused on was having a fucking party, like, and doing well at school. Like I was obsessed with science and then like poisoning my body. Like I don't remember that much pressure at the time, but I don't know if maybe I was like, I don't know.
Will say, like, I don't think this will be too personal, but I vividly remember, because like when we started dating in university, I at first remember being not embarrassed to like be naked in front of you or anything like that. I think a lot of like my body shame might come from like a Catholic upbringing of just like naked bodies.
We
are
rag
shameful.
on the Catholic Church a
Or
lot.
I just mean like, you know,
be
a
fair,
lot of
it's
people
fine.
grow up with the idea that like nudity is actually shameful, whereas
Yeah.
some people grow up in
you
the
still
idea
have that. Yesterday you
Yeah.
ran. We were naked at our like house, and you like went, well, definitely, because
'Cause
you're like
other
near
people
a
can see the
window.
window.
I was like, I'm
I could
truly
see
naked
them.
all the time.
that was less my own shame and more like they're like having a nice dinner.
Oh,
on there.
you saw the way you ran. I was like, is that just because
No,
you were near
there
a
was
window?
people like eating dinner on their like little thing, and I was like, they can definitely see.
I
me.
love that's when I bend over and show hole just to be like,
Oh my God.
you want a little dessert?
Oh, Greg.
Okay.
Now I lost track of what
You were
I was
saying that you had a hard time
Oh.
showing your body then?
Like, I think, no, what I remember vividly is the feeling of finally feeling comfortable just being naked in front of you when we weren't hanging out.
That's cool.
Or sorry, not when we weren't hanging out. When we weren't hooking up. So
Okay.
like there was a period of like we'd hook up and then I'd probably put my clothes back on right away.
Ew.
And then once we were like fully a couple and dating, I remember being like, oh my God, like I don't care. Like I can be naked
Yeah.
and like actually it doesn't matter what I look like right now because he's obviously with me. You know what I mean?
Yesterday we were filming some video where I had to like drop an apple in the frame. I was fully naked and I was really worried that like my schlong and balls were gonna
Like, coming on
fly.
camera.
Like I don't like wearing clothes. So yeah, I don't remember that. That's interesting because maybe you've never even told me that, and I just I
Yeah,
don't think
it wasn't
I
like
noticed that.
a crazy moment, but it's similar to like, and this is also like kind of sexual and intense if like our families are listening, but I think this happens to a lot of people. When I hit university and I finally came out and we started dating, it was the first time I was like, I can have sex whenever I want. This is crazy.
Yeah, that is an interesting.
You know what I mean? When you're
thought,
young,
yeah.
especially when you're gay, you don't really get to like explore that much.
Yeah.
Maybe one off here and there something happens. But then I was like, oh my God, just like whenever we want, we can have
Yeah,
this.
it's very the Felicity, the TV show, coming true.
So that's when I finally was like, oh my gosh, I don't have to feel insecure about my body because like I have proof that you're staying with me and it has nothing to do with my body.
They also said that body dysmorphia likely comes about, and like they're thinking you could start to diagnose it at the age of 12 or 13, like super young, is when they think it formally starts to happen. And we'll get into the physiology of like your brain and what that means later, but not ever really diagnosed until the 30s. And that's similar to when I was talking about, I made a video about hypersexuality disorder, and when we were talking about horniness, same thing. They think hypersexuality starts in your teens, but is not usually diagnosed or really thought of until you're like late
much
30s.
later, yeah.
Because there are these things that are like really taboo and life is complicated. And I think once you are on the planet for long enough, you start to go like, wait a second, maybe this is more of a disorder than I realized.
Right.
Actually, I don't know. This is the thing. It's like, I've never had body dysmorphia. So maybe it has plagued you for so long and you're just not able to say anything about it because of like shame or whatever.
Yeah,
but
or-
both hypersexuality and body dysmorphia, I think, have a lot of shame around them because they're not like things that
Super
they're sort of things we
vulnerable.
all struggle with maybe and I don't know why, but they just feel they got shamey vibes. Why?
Yeah,
is
I
that?
guess you're right. Everyone obviously has to look at themselves. And so
Yeah.
you might just think, is this what everyone goes through?
Yeah.
Like if you have severe body dysmorphia, you might just be like, but I don't know, like when you're transitioning into teenage years and finally thinking about it, you're not thinking about that perspective of like, is mine much worse? Like, is this
Yeah.
a disorder? And at that point too, you're too young to really think about
and
those
even like,
things.
for example, they use diagnosis as camouflaging. That's obsessive. They say again, they use all these diagnosis terms to say that 3 to 8 hours, you said somewhere between 2 to 5 hours, something long periods
five
of
to 8.
5 to 8 hours a day are being thought of these things. But it's not like I haven't thought about when I try on a shirt somewhere, I look at my body and go, oh, that one makes my ass look big. Like,
Right.
like
Or
you
my
kind
belly
of
stick out,
or,
or-
oh
yeah.
yeah, no, that's not like flattering for this part of my body. So like we all have those experiences. They're normal. That's what you do sometimes when you go shopping with your friends. So it's when that's taken to an extreme that you might have body dysmorphia. So maybe sometimes people make jokes like, oh, I have body dysmorphia, because maybe they're trying on all these things and they're constantly looking at one part of them. But maybe then they go and get a coffee and don't think about it again. And it's a total of half an hour that they've thought about it. And therefore now maybe you're not falling into this term that we are using a lot. But it is like, I honestly want to like talk with all of my friends about this.
It's true. Yeah. It's such an interesting thing to like classify something. We keep saying obviously so much, but I think we're just trying to be careful, not like, it's just interesting to talk about body confidence. I'll say that. And like vulnerability in terms of like self-image. And that doesn't have to be you hating your body, but it can still just be like feeling insecure about your body.
And it can ebb and flow too.
Yeah. And what I think the disorder difference is that you obsess also over things that are often objectively either not there or very minor.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's also different if you maybe have something that is objectively like a giant scar or something like that you might feel insecure about. Okay, there's like a genuine thing there that you will have to work through and process. But a lot of times body dysmorphia it's difficult for family and friends because they don't see it.
Yeah,
they're like,
that's
you just look great.
Point.
You look normal. You might even look like so good to them.
Yeah.
You know, in fact, I'll talk about bodybuilding a little later, and it is like even people who look amazing still have these like issues around their own bodies and feeling inadequate.
The fact that the highest proportion of it I was reading about was skin and hair.
Yeah, I never even thought
that
about
was
that.
Interesting because I just assumed it was getting jacked, body weight, getting
like
a big
belly,
ass,
like
hot girl tits. Like I don't know, just picturing all those things, but that made me be like, wow, that's really interesting. Like something to do with your skin and hair is like probably a lot more harder to control, harder for other people to relate to. I don't know, but that's when I was like, whoa, okay, I don't have this.
Something I saw that was interesting about risk factors in terms of personality types, like that could help you understand who's likely to get this. Even though there's not that much research, they were like, it is often people who have high performance brains, who have extreme eye for detail. People can often tell shades of color more specifically who have body dysmorphia. Like, I guess because it's like where it said something about like the brain, the visual processing parts of the brain are more hyperactive.
Yeah. So like that's one thing. Yeah. It's called the frontostriatal and the temporal parietal occipital parts of the brain. So they've actually studied people with body dysmorphia and found that those parts of their brain are essentially, there's more neurons there. The brain maps are more pronounced. And exactly, those are the parts of your brain that are involved with visual processing and processing detail. So that's like a really interesting way of being like, you could suffer from this, like, it's not your fault. Like your brain is actually built differently. And then also there are genetic, they think there's a strong genetic correlation. So they've done twin studies, and when I read them, I was like, I don't know, they weren't very good, but they like found heritability, but whatever. But there was one that was like, if you have, it was like a direct relative with body dysmorphia, you're 8 times more likely than normal to have body dysmorphia. So there's genetic components, there's physiological brain changes, and on top of that, there is a lot of psychological studies that you maybe had trauma growing up, and it can be a response to
like
that.
Even being bullied or teased or abused.
Or even neglected too. Like those things manifest themselves in your life in different ways, and body dysmorphia can be one of them too. So like if you had a specific traumatic event in your childhood, it would also be worth talking to your doctor about the fact that you would have a higher likelihood of having body dysmorphia if you thought you might have it.
Right. Yeah, I think it is just like, it's so interesting because I obviously always want to think about this through my own lens because I'm absolutely self-obsessed. But it's just even, I'm sorry, I'm just like trying to still be lighthearted even though we're like talking about something serious that neither of us have. But even like, I notice these small things. Like I definitely am more of like perfectionist vibes than you. And I think I'm like visually aware of things, but I don't consider myself to have body dysmorphia. Especially after
but you do, yeah. Like I guess if you were to like define attention to detail, like you,
and I definitely do think about these things. I couldn't quantify it as more than an hour, so because of that, I'd be like, I really don't think this like it doesn't.
You think about your body image or about what?
Yeah, like I can become hyper aware of minor things on my body, or even like truly I sit like this in the video podcast because I feel like, oh, I can see like my rolls when I sit totally open. Sort of thing. Like little things like that.
Yeah.
I'll always look at you. I'm like, you never have that. So,
Well, I pull my pants up over my roll.
and you're right. Everyone has it. And also
You know what I mean?
everyone's body's
is
different.
that I camouflage. Or I try to camouflage.
Maybe, yeah.
You know what I
maybe
mean?
you're
In some
self-aware of
ways.
it.
I wear I like... No, I'm just like, yeah, I'm trying. Like, again, I don't think I have body dysmorphia.
Everyone does
but I
it,
like
yeah.
you. Everyone has their thing. Like, I pull my pants up high to cover my like love handles, like nerd vibes, when I'm wearing like shorts and no shirt.
I think all this is proving is that like everyone does these things,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
we don't have body dysmorphia.
And and I almost do it now. Like sometimes I'll like pull my shorts down to the normal part and be like, that looks so much better. But it's like at some point I just decided that was the better thing to do. But now I'm like, no, you just look like a weird nerd. Your pants are high. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not even like I actually am looking at myself when I do it. It's like compulsive in that sense.
Something that stood out to me was that something like depression often has a course. Like, yes, people can be depressed for very long periods of time and can be anxious and go on meds, but often in studies, like after 6 months, people will feel less depressed, where it's like OCD and body dysmorphia are very often like very long-term conditions that people deal with for many, many years, decades, can go through treatment. And a lot of the treatments are, and the studies around treatments and their success is not around getting rid of it so much as just like managing it or improving the symptoms. And I guess that's like many mental health disorders, like you can't always get rid of them.
Yeah.
And depression would be the same, but it's just in studies oftentimes with treatment, like depression will take its course and then people will have like relief from it.
Wow. Fudge circles.
So I was thinking about the treatment of it, if we can talk about that a little bit. Yeah, like some things I had seen is that they do use high dose antidepressants like SSRIs.
SSRIs, right?
which is
Well,
also
you have to
given
get
for OCD.
diagnosed with those, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh, of course. This is for people who have been
Yeah, don't just like
diagnosed.
go get your hands on it.
And obviously cognitive behavioral therapy is a big one, but that's focused on reducing avoidance, like reducing self-focused attention or externalizing attention, and mental activities that help you learn to stop comparing and analyzing so much.
This is when social media comes in and it's bad. So there are studies that are like, they think that high social media use can actually be a precursor to body dysmorphia because it's a little bit chicken or the egg in the sense that they have found that people who use social media more are more likely to have lower self-esteem, but they can't tell if it's like the lower self-esteem means you use social media more. But there are many studies on this now because we're in the age of social media is bad, and like it's good to sometimes like have reasons like psychological reasons why that is the case. And then one specific study did see a decrease in self-esteem and self-image with an increase in social media use, like actively, like they made people use it more. Right. And then they do feel like low self-esteem is a precursor to body dysmorphia. So they're trying to like parse this out because a lot of what you do is obsessively compare yourself to others, which is kind of what social media is. Like if you're going on social media and pretending that you're like just there to enjoy everyone's life and not compare yourself to others, like you're lying to yourself. And then on top of that, like who knows, it could be causing it.
I'm sorry, I was.
Are you okay?
Literally putting the AC on because it's so hot in here.
It
is like
wow.
37 degrees, and I was just like, I'm melting, and it's.
You like never go on your phone. I was like, we just got a text that like everything's over. There's an asteroid coming.
I can control it from my phone, and I was just like, I'm actually melting. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to ignore you there. I was just. Like,
I forget what I was talking about, but
you
I'm
were talking
sure it
about
was
social
super
media.
profound. Just
It
take
was
that in and
social
move
media
on.
and the use of it and how like it can make it worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, I think that pressure is on everyone. But of course, if you're predisposed or somebody who's already having these issues, that's just going to inflame it even more, I think.
Yeah. And so I think like it's never going to help to use or be on social media if you have body dysmorphia. And
Even
I do feel
period.
like filters
You know
and
what I
like
mean?
everything
Like,
are
even
just
if
going to
you
make a
don't.
mess.
And I wonder, it would be interesting. I didn't see anything about this, but the incidence of body dysmorphia, is it increasing as social media becomes so prevalent, as we see this imagery every second of the day?
Body dysmorphia is increasing. again from like surveys, but then it's hard to tell if it's just becoming
popular, like
better at
diagnose.
diagnosing.
Yeah, like
so
it's
like
too early to really understand if it's just the proper diagnosis now.
but it's honestly just like just like we can all understand why. It's like if a big part of it is comparing your body to others, we now have so many ways to do that. And I just think like Instagram's porn, like TikTok is porn, like pornographic, like in the sense that like even more pornographic for like body image, because at least in porn they get bent all over and you get to see them bang each other. Like,
Oh my God.
on Instagram it's like an insane pose.
I mean, I'm
and
not
it's
sure
just like
that
porn of-
one is helping more than the other.
No, I just mean one's like very sexual and the other is almost more like body comparative.
Right. Yeah, it's like not always about-
when I'm watching porn, I'm not necessarily like, oh, look at their bodies, in the same way as like when a guy on Instagram's just like, look at my body. Like in Greece, look at me body in Speedo as I kind of contort my body
You're
in
right.
the perfect way.
And photos in particular, like you're finding the best light, you're finding the perfect way. Not
And it's
that they
insane.
don't do that in videos and porn, but
It's like that's
you're
my
seeing a
point is it's
moving
like
body.
yeah, and at some point they're like they have to perform for you a little bit, and I'm like, nah, the body's in like a weird situation that's not just like the perfect abs. Like it's so weird how Instagram there's bodies I see in real life, and then there's bodies on Instagram and TikTok,
Yeah.
and they're honestly different. Like
It is crazy.
It's-
Yeah, it really messes your brain up for thinking what is normal. to
Normal.
look at. And sometimes in real life, I see people who work out every day of their life, and then you're like, they don't even have those bodies. Like, 'cause
Or-
they're probably not taking steroids or like have enhancers to help them get those crazy bodies, or it's the wrong lighting circumstance.
exactly, that's what I think. Sometimes I see like I've seen an influencer who's sort of OnlyFans vibes that's on Twitter. Wow, it's like an alien would be like, is this English? I've seen an influencer who's fans vibes on Twitter, porn energy, in real life in Toronto, and it was shocking because it was like he just does amazing photos of himself. And he has the most incredible body. He looks 6'4". Saw him in real life. I would have walked by, would have thought nothing.
I want
of
to
him.
know so bad after
I'll tell
this,
you
have to
after.
show
It's
me.
like, yeah. But it's like he like lives near us, and I was just like, oh my God. Like
Right.
sometimes I think about like the photos I take of myself, and I'm like, Greg, you need to like go to a course or something. Like it's like you can make yourself look amazing.
Yeah,
like I don't
but
know how, but I know
Then
that
you're
there's a
setting up
way.
for disappointment. You know
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah. Like, I mean, that's like, I'm not trying to say like I was disappointed seeing him in real life. I was actually more like, damn, like y'all got a setup. That's
Yeah.
good. And I can only assume so many influencers. I bet it happens in LA all the time. Actually, it happens when I see celebrities in real life, because we've been in situations. I'm like, oh my God, they look so weird. Like sometimes you see their filler up close, and you're just like, that's so weird in real life. But under the right sort of camera, that filler kind of works, but in real life it's from the
Yeah.
side. You're like, you're an alien.
That's true. Where you're like, or even like for men and women in makeup, filler can look totally different, but without it, then you're like, whoa.
Oh, I also read an intense study that made me sad, which was like that we need to have like body dysmorphia, almost like regulation and consultants in cosmetic surgery places, and that like cosmetic surgeons need to be really versed in body dysmorphia.
Right.
But I'm like, there's no way cosmetic surgeons, like, sorry, not to drag them, like maybe they would be like, you're being really unfair right now. But I'm like, when I think about their business model, especially in a country like Canada where we have public health care, but not for cosmetic surgery, they're trying to make money.
Right.
So
But still, you're probably right in some ways, but of course there's probably cosmetic
Yeah.
surgeons that are also like, but I want my clients to have a healthy life.
Yeah.
Like, yes, I want to like, I would hope that most cosmetic surgeons are also trying to like give people something that can make them happier.
But
And
if it's
they knew
hard
it
to
was
diagnose,
the-
right? Like if it's
Yeah.
underdiagnosed, if it's something that we're not talking about, the point of the article was like, we need to almost have like body dysmorphia, like guidelines and surveys prior to cosmetic surgery. Like, is there a way that we can set up like some sort of field work where we can understand like this is going to be okay, or this is just another extreme version of trying to camouflage the thing that
Is
your
actually
brain
the-
has
yeah.
created that's not actually a flaw.
Well, that
But I don't know.
actually-
That's a tough one.
If I can go into my other study, because I
Okay,
think it
yeah.
relates to this, it's about bodybuilding, but how you were like, is there maybe something else? Like maybe not getting this surgery, maybe not getting these muscles is like maybe something else is what's going to make you feel happier.
Okay, yeah.
I think is kind of what this study was trying to address. So
Okay.
I just want to start with the caveat that the study mentioned at the end, which is like, it does not imply that bodybuilding is unhealthy. So like, I'm not saying bodybuilding is unhealthy.
Yeah.
But
bodybuilding's weird. I'm kidding.
Bodybuilders are particularly likely to experience muscle dysphoria.
And that's the one that's very pronounced
Dysmorphia.
amongst men.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so
Muscle, what is it?
Dysmorphia.
Dysmorphia. Muscle dysmorphia.
Yeah. And so, which has also been linked to many other health conditions, like mental health conditions, anxiety, depression, suicide attempts, substance abuse. So that's why this study was it's worth looking into, what is happening. And I thought this was interesting. I hope I can explain it well, but using like a psychological theory called the basic psychological needs theory, which obviously is just like psychology. It's like a structure which they understand things.
Yeah.
They consider that there's like 3 things everyone needs to be high functioning and mentally healthy. And that is autonomy, competence, and relatedness are the terms they use.
Autonomy, competence, and relatedness.
Relatedness in particular is like connectedness to other people.
So being able to relate, connect. Okay.
And so
can you go through each one? Do you know each one, like kind of what that means?
No, but autonomy would obviously be like having your own sense of who you are, being able to do the things you want in your life.
Feeling like you have your life has like an impact and you're able to sort of like create
you make those choices.
Make choices and
competence is like your ability to do things, like feeling like you are good at something.
Okay.
Right? And then feeling like you have relationships, that you're connected with other people. This is like
those are good.
Yeah, but this is obviously like my 101 explanation of it, which like I'm not a psychologist. I just read.
No, but that's good because I'm feeling weird right now, and I think it's the competence is what's lacking.
Yeah, it's a
in my
nice
life.
perspective.
It's like, which one is like lacking? It's like, I definitely think I have autonomy because I kind of feel like I make decisions and then things happen. I've always felt that I have a lot of freedom in my life. But there's something about competence right now. I'm so bored and I'm just kind of derailed, but we're gonna keep going.
Okay.
But I'm like, I'm so bored and I don't want to do work, and then therefore you like don't have the ability to feel competent.
Yeah, totally.
Because work sometimes makes you feel competent. Even though we hate capitalism and drag like
it can give you a
working
sense of
on this podcast is like
competence.
sorry, so continue.
Work doesn't have to be capitalist either, right? Like people can do things, like you can have hobbies that
it makes me be like I need to go do something that I'm gonna.
So the idea behind this theory is that like frustration of any of these 3 needs can lead to maladaptive strategies. Like you can be trying to find extrinsic like goals, or compensating by finding rigid behavior patterns, or right, like you can change your life to try and fulfill needs that are actually being neglected somewhere else. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so the study was looking to see if muscle building and dysmorphia was correlated with the lack of these needs. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm like, it probably is.
Yes. So it says that in particular, subjects' need frustration predicted their drive for masculinity. So after they surveyed, I think it was like 200 or 300 men who were bodybuilders, the ones that had these need frustrations that were evaluated to be lacking these were more likely to be driven by getting more muscular. And in turn, that predicted if they were more likely to have body dysmorphia.
I immediately feel so bad.
Why?
About making fun of jacked people for being like boring and like bad at.
Yeah, no,
you
that's
know what
fair.
I mean? Because I'm like, I oh my God. I'm like, I've literally made fun of them because I'm like, I sometimes meet jacked people and it's like, you're lacking relatedness.
Maybe.
And I'm like making a joke because it feels easy to make fun of them because it's like punching up. Like jacked white people at the beach exist all over the like Toronto gate. And there's like, of course I'm going to make fun of them. But when I talk to them, I'm like, And now I'm like, oh my God, it's because maybe they're suffering from their relatedness.
Well, it goes back to that idea that all negativity comes from insecurity.
Yes.
Not that having like a nice body is negativity, but that idea that like a lot of the qualities you might not like in someone else, unless it's your own insecurity, might be their insecurity.
I need to remember that more. That's always how I would like help us cope with all the like homophobia on YouTube. I knew it so deeply. I'd be like, oh well, they're all just and I feel like I've forgotten about it. But I'm like, I have to remember that.
It's a nice way to at least protect yourself too from feeling damaged from others.
Oh my God, like when you see a jacked guy, it's like, oh.
Well, maybe. I mean, I can see that in myself. The motivation to look good obviously comes from wanting validation, right? Not for everyone. Sometimes it is totally health. Sometimes it is just like feeling good, mentally good, mobility. Like there's lots of reasons to be physically active. But for a lot of people, it's validation. Yeah, right?
For sure.
To feel seen.
Yeah.
And so that was related to this. And so relatedness, or that connectedness, was the biggest need that was being lacked, that significantly predicted their body dysmorphia through the drive for muscularity.
Whoa, that's all that all is making so much sense in my brain. But I'm just focusing on like cishet gay culture. But I'm like trying to just like zoom out and be like, okay. But then I'm like, if you, is it those jacked guys that I'm like completely just at this point, like no one listened to what I'm saying, even though it's a podcast. But like, is it like that those jacked guys are more likely to have muscle dysphoria? Dysmorphia, sorry. Like, is it sort of like
the premise of the study was that bodybuilders have a higher rate of muscle dysmorphia than like the average person.
That's so interesting because I think that's what I was like.
And that's why they're saying, like, remember the beginning, bodybuilding is not intrinsically unhealthy. There are lots of people who do it and have healthy motivations and healthy relationships to these psychological needs. But they found that many of like a percentage of these people had these like need frustrations, and they were often linked to connectedness or relatedness.
Wow.
And then that was directly correlated to having a higher likelihood of muscle dysmorphia.
Oh my God. And now I feel so bad about making fun of all these gays, circuit gays, because I'm like, they're gay. Like,
yeah,
that's also
it's a coping
hard.
strategy.
Like,
it's
yeah,
literally
like you've
their
had
final,
shame.
like,
you're not being related to people like your whole life, and then you're getting jacked, and it's like now I have so much sympathy.
It's so much more than even just jacked. Like, it's hard. It's like, it says their final quote was like, to cope with need frustration, individuals may be oriented towards extrinsic goals such as perfect body, fame, and wealth. So those things as well, fame and wealth, unrelated to body dysmorphia. You look at people who are like always chasing money, always chasing success. It's maybe because they're not fulfilled in a different way, that they're trying to like find a way to feel satisfied, feel happy, feel loved, feel content.
That's so like where I'm at right now. I really feel like I've been so satisfied in my life with so many things, and just in the last 2 weeks where I've been a little down, I've been like, I'm not satisfied. And then I'm literally thinking about, I don't really think about I'm thinking about literally my body, not necessarily my body, but like fame. Like those things are haunting me a little, like way more than ever.
Yeah,
because I'm not feeling competent. Sorry, it's like the relatedness, I'm like all good, I think.
Yeah,
like,
you're really good at that.
I just mean like I like hanging out with people, and I feel very blessed that I always feel quite connected to people. But what was I'm just going back to derailing again about this competence thing. What do you do? Like if you want to be more relatedness to someone, you have to find people who you relate to and hang out with them.
You probably just need to like put a little more focus into family and friends and finding relationships, which like anything else can be hard. Like going to the gym for someone who doesn't exercise is a very challenging experience to make a habit. I would assume relatedness to people is challenging for a lot of people. They might hang out with someone and be like, that was awkward. I didn't like connect with them. I don't know how to feel. And it's like, you have to put effort and work into that. Same with autonomy. And again, this is one sort of like psychological theory framework.
Yes. Okay.
So
fine.
That's also another caveat that these all exist. Obviously, that's been like studied and researched, but there's like a whole bunch of self-determination theories. Like these are all of them you can see on my page, and this was just one of them.
The basic needs theory.
Yeah, exactly.
I like it though. Like it's just like fun to learn these things because you can like think about them for your own life.
Yeah, and I think it is like anything, at the very least, a framework to think through for yourself and to be like, am I doing these for reasons that are quote unquote healthy? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That are not correlated in studies with outcomes that show maybe I will be dissatisfied always with this.
What's also interesting when I think about like even you being at the beginning, being like, Greg, you're an athlete. Like I find that this time of year I always work out so much more, but it's mostly because like I bike everywhere, and like you can play tennis outside, and like I get so happy doing those things, and like I really enjoy them. But then at the same time I'm like, but what is it that you're ignoring? Like I find that sometimes like everyone gets seasonal affective disorder, and I obviously get sad, but I find I'm always like, it's not that bad, because I think in the winter I have a lot more time to kind of like be creative and be solemn and like do these things that like maybe I ignore in the summer because I'm literally being so physically like I'm almost like, you know what I mean? Like you're doing these things that are good. I'm not saying it's bad to be physically active, but like anything in life, there's only a finite amount of time. Other things go to the wayside. For me, it's like reading and creativity and these things that I like go to in the winter to cope.
Like still with.
Yeah, that are actually like maybe kind of what make me feel competent. You know what I mean? Like they kind of like, it's when I create something that
guess.
I'm like, wow, I did that. Whereas when I play a tennis game, I'm kind of like, that was fun.
Yeah, but
I
you can become competent at that, and it can bring like,
that's true.
I think like sports are an amazing, especially team sports, or at least sports where like tennis, you're still playing against someone and building a relationship.
Totally.
I think that it's an amazing way to be active that isn't hyper focused on like how you're perceived from the outside.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Because going to the gym, which we both do, and like lifting weights is also really interesting because it's all about getting bigger.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be. Like obviously building muscle
but the innate,
is a
like,
health response. But you're right. Both of us are like, oh, I want to look like fit. I want to like feel good, look good.
And to what end is like what I think I'm starting to get to now. As I like look in the mirror and I'm like, okay, well, I've never looked like this before. So when do you stop? Like, honestly, like, it's interesting because it's like I can obviously continually look at someone who is more fit than me, but now I'm actually like, oh my God, Greg, like you're
what are you trying to achieve?
Yeah, you look a way that like if you could have thought of when you were young, you'd be so happy and pleased. So like, how do you sort of navigate that? Is not like, I don't know how to describe
it's a
that.
fair question. I think
Is
that's
that,
why.
like, is that a really annoying question? I'm like,
no. I
I'm
think
so proud of my body.
no.
And
I think a lot of people
like, I kind of want to like shoot myself right now.
No, I don't think it's a problem to talk about. Like obviously, we're both in a privileged position to be able to have that be a thing that we get to think about. Like lots of people don't have time for the gym. Lots of people have crazy stressful lives with kids and whatever. Like there's lots of reasons why people.
Yeah, we're bored, honey. Okay.
So what I'm saying though is I've lost track of what I was saying.
Oh, sorry. Now I was like, I'm gonna shoot myself, or like even asking this question. You're like, no, it's okay to think about when you're gonna stop. Like,
oh, I guess it's like, oh, I lost it. I'm just thinking, I don't think that's that shameful. I think like everyone starts and it's easy to be propelled by goals, but I think everyone who especially bodybuilds, or even say you're like trying to run a faster mile or pushing yourself to run a marathon, you're always going to hit the point where you're like, I did it. What's it for now? And I think that is a good opportunity to explore, what is this for? Like, how can I make it? Can it be meaningful without those things that are external validation? When I get to tell everyone I did this, or
because I'm so bad at validation. Like I hate like recently like some literal strangers after tennis, like this one guy, like don't know that well, was just like, you look jacked, and I like crumbled. I was like, hi, you look jacked, you bigger than me, boy, you look bigger. And he was just like, okay, yeah, I've been doing push-ups too. I was like, yeah, you big boy, and like walked away because it was like, wait, no, I think like he was probably like, oh, I'm gonna validate him. Like that's probably what he wants. And it's like, it's so funny because it's like, obviously I want validation, everyone does, but it's another thing I need to learn about is how to take in validation, because at a certain point, that is probably why we're all doing so many things. Yeah. And it's like important to learn how to take it in. And it did make me feel good. And I think I came home and like told you. I almost had to get the validation later by being like, guess what someone said?
Processing it later.
Yeah, but it's like, that's also annoying. If I actually could have processed it in the moment, I wouldn't have to come home and like brag to you that happened. You know what I mean? I would have been like, thank you. Like I've
take it in.
Like there's obviously something there too, where like, if I'm going to ever reach a point where I feel, I don't know, life's just a quest for contentment. Maybe there's something there where I need to learn how to like take things in. Like, and that's some people might, or I don't know.
I mean, you're right. It's a hard question of like, is it about learning how to take it in, or realizing like that in the first place, the external validation is not what you're doing it for. I mean, maybe it is like partially. So maybe you feel weird about that, but like, ultimately it can be neither here nor there. When someone compliments you, just being like thanks and moving on, because that might not be your goal. But it is so hard. Obviously so many people that are working out want to look good, and it's like human nature to want to look good and like be attractive to other people and also like be good at stuff. So it's hard to just be like, no, you should be just fully contented, only caring about yourself, not caring at all what anyone else thinks. Like this is a thing that I don't think can really be very realistic. Yeah. And it's not like maybe that healthy to even tell someone to not care at all what other people think.
Yeah. Okay.
But I don't know where I'm landing with that, but it's just like, if you did have this, like, if you just knew you were just doing it to be healthy, it probably would phase you less.
Yeah. And I think that's like, what's interesting is I think a majority of like, what I'm doing right now is because it's healthy. It involves hanging out with people, like canoeing and tennis and all these things. But it's the lifting weights at the gym thing that is like, it makes me feel really good. I will say, like, I have endorphins after. I always feel good, but I'm always like, no, this one's leading down a path of something else.
It can, yeah.
It's like,
I think it's important to say that like
validation or-
strength training is very healthy, right?
Yes,
So, like,
yes, and I exactly
in the same way
yeah.
cardio is like especially like in elderly people, like strength training can help with so many things.
But it's
including,
kind of not stopping.
yeah, you're
Because
right.
it's like, okay,
two-
now we're going
two
to
by
another
yeah.
weight. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, do I want that weight? Like, I don't know. Like, it's kind of weird. And there's a lot of validation, a lot of like people at the gym now going like, gains, bro, like to me. Like, and I'm like, wait, am I all of a sudden in this world? Like, I don't want to be in this world, but I like enjoy this.
But
And then
you
like,
can also find your own plateau intentionally. And
yes,
say,
yeah, that's what I'm more
I'm
like
happy
kind of
here, and
curious
It makes
about.
me feel good to work out, and then I'm happy with the way I look, and that's like very amazing. Obviously,
Yeah.
we're on a podcast about body dysmorphia. Like, just
Yeah.
think of the privilege. I think like
Yeah, I
you're so good at writing like a gratitude journal every morning that it's like that's probably really helpful for people who don't have body dysmorphia to just be like,
Yeah.
I look at the things I have in my life, including my able body, including my body that's like relatively fit, or like that I have the ability to put it where I want and work on it if I want to. And there are some people who suffer from conditions that their minds plague them about. You know?
I'm like so annoying. I so don't have body dysmorphia. Like I like always
You
look in the
definitely
mirror and I'm like, you're hot. I want not. Like in the most annoying way. Like no matter where I've been in my life, like skinniest, like whatever thing, I'm always like sick, bro.
Yeah,
It's
you have like extreme self-confidence in
no,
general.
I know, but like that could be something else. Like maybe just something about that. Like it's I don't know. Sometimes I'm like
No, I think it's a
it's
really
no,
good
it's what we talked about last time. I'm not self-aware. I have a lack of self-awareness. I'm covered in sunscreen. There's a booger in my nose, and I'm like, "You're hot." And it's
think
like
that's
not so.
ignorance is bliss.
I'm just an ignorant, unself-aware person. Ding.
I think like that's a fine note to end this on. I was
Okay.
only gonna add like obviously if you think you suffer from body dysmorphia,
Yeah.
like again, we're not the source to learn about it from in terms
No.
of like you should talk to your doctor or a therapist. There are lots of resources online. If you just type in body dysmorphia disorder, there's organizations that have support, have
And
links.
ways to find out, like there's online diagnostic tests you can just take from home, and it'll also help you understand like where you fall.
Yeah, and I think it's worth just thinking
Yeah,
about if
for
it
sure.
calls to you. Like it's easy to laugh off for some people, but
Also, even sharing this podcast with people who say that they have it, having a conversation with people who say that they have it, depending on their tone, you know, like in what, you know, is it a glass of wine or you're getting deep? Because that's what I kind of have thought about a lot. And why we thought about this is I've been hearing it said a lot. And now I'm sort of like, am I not taking it seriously
Right.
enough? Or are we
people
all
saying
not
it
taking it
casually.
seriously? Yeah.
Yeah.
So then it's like now you can either bring up this conversation or send this podcast to people and be like, oh, this is like, you know, the sort of deep dive on it. Like either we keep talking about this because you might have it, or we also assess where we're at and have the cool conversations we just have with each other. These are like great conversations to have with everyone because I think we're all suffering from this in the social media age and maybe even forever. Maybe even hunter-gatherers were like, I don't know, probably not, but whatever. It's like is a plague of our existence kind of as intellectual beings right now that it's like worth talking to friends and family about this stuff.
Yep.
Okay. Next week might be, who knows, how light makes heat on your skin. Actually, I have to read that like 48 times before I understand it. Or it might just be about like farts. Who knows?
All right, thanks for listening. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Purse.